Normally, the idea is that if consumption falls, savings rise. When savings rise, interest rates go down as banks need to pay people less for storing their money. When interest...
This is a thing people do a lot. Keynes' point is the paradox of thrift. The reason why they call it a paradox is because although individual savings increase, right? If consumption falls, individual savings increase, total savings actually decrease.
So he came up with a recovery package that would be unimaginable today, allowing businesses in every industry to collude without the threat of antitrust prosecution, and workers to demand salaries about 25% above where they ought to have been given market forces.
I mean, that, yes, would be unimaginable today, but you know what else would be? Purge the rottenness out of the system. Liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate the farmers, liquidate real estate. That, according to Herbert Hoover, was the advice he received from Andrew Mellon, the Treasury Secretary, as America plunged into depression.
The economic crash became a Great Recession thanks to the intervention of Barack Obama, who spiked spending, taxation, and regulation. He followed FDR's playbook. The result was the slowest economic recovery in modern American history.
It was slow because we didn't spend enough. He does the whole Austrian business cycle thing. So let's pull up the notes on that. I don't like it. He might make some good points in here. I don't know. I need to read general theory at some point. That's what I need to do. He called it. I think he called like the writing style boring or something. Which I don't know. I mean, it's like an economic. Of course it is, but you know. All right.
It's the Roaring '20s in America. An age of miracles, an age of art, an age of excess.
Goodbye.
But no more. Now the 30s have begun, and there is a new word, depression.
What caused the Great Depression? And could it happen again? It's one of the great puzzles of economics, and one of the most important questions in history. It's important because depending on what you think caused the Great Depression, you might structure an entire economic policy around avoiding such a situation again. And indeed...
Where's the pancake? I need the... He mentioned like the whole... Well, he mentioned Austrian business cycle theory. I want the pancake analogy. Where is it?
That's precisely what has happened over the course of American history. In the desire to prevent another Great Depression, our government has grown in unprecedented ways, ironically setting the stage for a great stagnation still to come. There are essentially three main theories as to what caused the Great Depression: the Keynesian theory, the monetarist theory, and the Austrian theory. John Maynard Keynes, born in 1883, is perhaps the most influential economist in modern history. His book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money...
Fuck, I don't know enough about the Great Depression and know specifically how it caused it, but you know...
...is a nearly unreadable tome with a seductive central thesis that a free market...
Nearly unreadable tome.
...left to its own devices does not create full employment, but that by increasing...
Based and true. I don't think anyone honestly like disputes that anymore because like everyone... I'm pretty sure everyone at this point has come on board with nominal and real rigidities, so...
Demand in the marketplace, via government pumping, full employment can indeed be achieved. According to Keynes, the problem of the Great Depression was secular stagnation. People apparently stopped wanting to buy things. Normally, the idea is that if consumption falls, savings rise. When savings rise, interest rates go down as banks need to pay people less for storing their money. When interest...
This is a thing people do a lot. Keynes' point is the paradox of thrift. The reason why they call it a paradox is because although individual savings increase, right? If consumption falls, individual savings increase, total savings actually decrease. That's the whole point of the paradox, because it leads to a decrease in aggregate demand, which decreases total output, which in turn will decrease total savings. That's the whole point of the paradox. The paradox states that an increase in autonomous savings leads to a decrease in aggregate demand, and thus a decrease in gross output, which will in turn lower total savings. The paradox is, narrowly speaking, that total saving may fall because of the individual's attempts to increase their saving, and more broadly speaking, that increase in saving may be harmful to the economy. That's the Yeah, he's literally doing a logical fallacy right now. Paradox is an example of a fallacy composition. The idea that when what is true of the parts must always be true of the whole. That's what he's doing here. Like he's saying
secular stagnation. People apparently stopped wanting to buy things.
People stopped wanting to buy things.
Normally, the idea is that if consumption falls, savings rise. When savings rise,
and their savings rise, so now he's assuming
down as banks need to pay people less for storing.
Now he's assuming total savings is increasing, when that might not necessarily be true. Just because people stop buying stuff doesn't necessarily and start saving more doesn't necessarily mean that total savings is going to increase.
When interest rates go down, borrowing increases. Investments and innovation are thus renewed. This theory, supply-side economics, was rejected by Keynes. Keynes argued that if businesses expected demand to level off for the long term, they wouldn't invest at all. Thus,
and then now we have the objectively true and based animal spirits. Animal spirits, theory to business cycle, which we read this one paper on, which shows that compared to, I am assuming he's going to mention monetarist stuff as well, but the Keynesian model, at least from this one study, seemed to be quite a bit better than the Austrian one. I actually really like this. There's this. I hope I'm able to find it. I think it's this. There was this lecture.
So thank you, everybody.
This guy actually gives a really good explanation of the Keynesian cross.
Spending, investment spending, and government spending, and also net exports. But just for our purposes today, I'm just going to assume a closed economy. So consumption spending is C, investment spending is I, and government spending is G. The first graphical model of using this equation was called the Keynesian cross, or the income and expenditure model. So you take those three components of expenditure and you stack them on top of each other. And that gives you the total level of expenditure in the economy. So you have consumption spending, and then you add investment spending, and then you add government spending. And that gives you the total level of expenditure. Notice that there's this diagonal line coming out of the origin. That's the equilibrium condition line. That's the line where all levels of income equal the levels of expenditure. And so if our economy is on that line, it means that we're in macroeconomic equilibrium from the Keynesian perspective. Okay, so you'll notice that only one of the components of expenditure has a slope, and that's the consumption function there at the bottom. The consumption function is the only one that has a slope, and it's totally dependent on income. So you add the intercept is autonomous consumption, and you have income multiplied by what's called the marginal propensity to consume, which turns out.
Wait, did I miss the video on Keynes? No, we're watching it right now. Right now, I'm just explaining. He just said
investment and innovation are thus renewed.
Right now, he talked about the paradox of thrift, and he's being dumb on it because he's like, oh, when consumption falls, savings increased, and Keynes is stupid, even though Keynes' whole point was that even though individual savings might increase, that might cause total savings to fall. That's the whole issue. And then now he's doing Keynes thought that he's doing the animal spirits thing.
According to Keynes, the problem of the Great Depression was secular stagnation. People apparently stopped wanting, or thus renewed. This theory, supply-side economics, was rejected by Keynes. Keynes argued that if businesses expected demand to level off for the long term, they wouldn't invest at all. Thus, to restart the economy.
Now he's doing businesses don't expect the economy don't expect demand to go up. They're not going to invest, which is true. Mega based.
To be the only
and there's this video from the Mises Institute. This guy actually shits on this graph, but I think he actually does a good explanation of the Keynesian
variable
cross.
that goes into determining the Keynesian spending multipliers, which you've heard a lot about, I'm sure. And then you stack on investment spending, which isn't dependent on income, importantly, and government spending, which also is not dependent on income. Notice the slope of that investment spending line and the government spending line is totally dependent on the consumption function. So
what are you guys talking about? Boring economic stuff.
So you just sort of stack it on top. In my classes,
wait, no, right now it's fun economic stuff. We'll get into the real boring shit later.
To refer to it as a stack of pancakes. You've got a stack of consumption pancakes, a stack of investment spending pancakes, and a stack of terrible tasting government spending pancakes. Okay, so the reason I talk about the stack of pancakes is because it makes it easier for students to think about taking some of those pancakes out. So if we start taking away some spending, and in the Keynesian model, what's typically done is we say there's this unanticipated decrease in investment spending. So you see that investment spending line? What I'm about to do when I click the button here is it's going to fall, but you'll notice that the top line falls down at the same rate. It does the same exact thing. So, and that's because what we're going to stipulate is that there is no response from the government. There's no government policy that steps in and says we're going to change the way we're spending because of the change in investment spending. So watch what happens when we have an unanticipated decrease in investment spending.
This is literally the Great Depression right here, guys.
Spending. Well, it wasn't very smooth. So they both fall together and the economy collapses. And the reason for that is because of a very important Keynesian assumption that's put in, and that is that wages are sticky. Everybody's heard of this, the whole sticky wage.
Wages are sticky. I don't think anyone seriously disputes that wages are sticky anymore. At least not to my knowledge. He keeps suggesting that it's silly. He's calling this graph stupid, but it's actually one of the better explanations of the Keynesian cross that I've heard.
And so since wages are sticky, if we have a decrease in spending, which means that firms are receiving lower revenue, firms still have to pay those higher wages or those stuck wages. And so they decrease output, but then they can't lower the wage so that they can have full employment at the new lower level of spending and the new lower level of output. So there's this inherent mismatch. There's these inherent persistent disequilibria in labor markets because wages are stuck at too high of a level for whatever reason. There are a few reasons that are offered, like maybe there's a psychological reason workers don't want to accept a lower wage. There are maybe legal.
I feel like Krugman, I guess. or ISLM. Oops. I feel like it was in one of these videos. Krugman gave some good empirical evidence for sticky wages. Wage stickiness. Here we go.
On slides. They've been doing some great work at the San Francisco Fed, looking at the distribution of wage changes. And what you find out is that there are a lot of individuals for whom the wage change from last year to this year is zero. Just zero. And it turns out when the economy
Have you tried Deadlock or Monkey? No.
is depressed, a lot higher fraction, precisely zero. That's exactly what you'd expect to see if what's happened is a depressed economy, lots of unemployment. In a way, in terms of supply and demand, wages should be falling, but very
I know.
wages. So that's, we've got very direct evidence of wage stickiness. We also have a bit of evidence from the catastrophe that is Europe. So this is from Alan Taylor and Kevin O'Rourke paper on the crisis in the Eurozone. And looking at the countries that are a mess, the blue lines are employment, the red lines are private sector wages. Okay, Spain has 26% unemployment. Ireland has almost 14% unemployment. And Ireland is, you can say Spain, oh, it's regulations, it's unions. Ireland, before the crisis, was supposed to be a highly flexible economy. But even in Ireland, wages do not fall. The only place where you actually see...
I mean, there's that venture capitalist, and there's plenty of... there's plenty of games with economies in them.
Which shows that if things are catastrophic enough, wages will fall, but they really don't want to fall. Latvia is supposed to be a story of flexibility, and yet, even in Latvia, so what you want to look at is the green line. Even there, in the face of massive unemployment, wages are flat. And one interesting thing, by the way, on this whole issue of price stickiness and wage stickiness, there was always a fairly large divide between the regular macro guys and the international macro people. International macro people never bought into real business cycle stuff, or most of them did not, because if you look at the international scene, and particularly if you look at what happened when exchange rates change, it's just glaringly obvious that a lot of prices are set in domestic currency, so that when exchange rates change, so do relative wages, relative prices. And you see a lot of that in this crisis. So one of the nice things about this is...
There's one more graph, Iceland,
I have all those European countries with terrible economic crises, and still wages not falling, and meanwhile you have Iceland. So this is not a country with a population of Brooklyn, this is a country with a population of one neighborhood in Brooklyn, right? And wages did not fall in krona, but they fell drastically. Basically, Iceland had a 40% fall in wages measured in euros because the krona was devalued. And that's telling you that wages really are sticky in domestic currencies. This is the...
Anyway, yeah, there's good evidence for wage stickiness, so...
Massive government interventionism would be necessary. FDR took the Keynesian theory to heart. It failed utterly. In fact, in an early iteration of Keynesian theory, Herbert Hoover actually radically increased government...
Can we stimulate which system brings the most prosperity? Wait, I have ads. I mean, listen, we'll get there one day with the AI shit.
Hoover on his own agenda in 1932.
We might have done nothing. That would have been utter ruin.
I'm pretty sure FDR had like the highest GDP growth out of any president, right? Wasn't it at like 10% for his term or whatever?
Instead, we met the situation with proposals to private business.
He's talking about Hoover right now, but
of the most gigantic program of economic defense.
I feel like FDR's New Deal worse than a prolonged Great Depression. I feel like FDR had really high GDP growth.
Counterattack
I feel like I remember that.
Ever evolved in the history of the Republic.
In 1929, the federal budget was $3.1 billion. By 1932, he
all we care about is the deficit. Okay.
$4.6 billion, a nearly 50% increase. Hoover also participated.
Herbert Hoover never radically increased government spending.
In subsidy. Two, he'd increased it to $4.6 billion.
4.6. Wow. I guess that was probably a lot bigger in terms of percentage GDP back then. Am I misremembering this? I feel like FDR had a really high GDP growth. Is that a deficit of... I think this is literally just spending.
The federal...
He just said budget. He didn't even say deficit.
In the history of the Republic.
In 1929, the federal budget was $3.1 billion. By 1932, he'd increased it to $4.6 billion, a nearly 50% increase. Hoover also participated in subsidies to agriculture on a massive scale, tried to pressure firms not to cut workers and wages, forced the government to pay above market wages for federal projects. Hoover also pursued government-sponsored loans to states and banks. Hoover even pressed enormous tax increases. FDR doubled down on Hoover's policies.
This vicious tightening.
I want to see what the debt was though. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, debt to GDP, Fred. It was definitely high during the Great Depression, but like, it only goes back to 1960.
Circle of our declining national income had to be broken. We accepted the final responsibility of government to spend money when no one else had money left to spend.
That's a GDP, 16%, 17%, 22%, 34%. It's not even that high.
The result was, according to professors Harold Cole and Lee Ohanian of UCLA's Department of Economics, an economic depression prolonged by at least 7 years. According to Cole and Ohanian, quote, President Roosevelt believed that excessive competition was responsible for the depression by reducing prices and wages, and by extension, reducing employment and demand for goods and services. So he came up with a recovery package that would be unimaginable today, allowing businesses in every industry to collude without the threat of antitrust prosecution, and workers to demand salaries about 25% above where they ought to have been given market forces.
I mean, that, yes, would be unimaginable today, but you know what else would be unimaginable today, Ben? Liquidate labor, liquidate... Well, what's the quote? Purge the rottenness out of the system. Liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate the farmers, liquidate real estate. That, according to Herbert Hoover, was the advice he received from Andrew Mellon, the Treasury Secretary, as America plunged into depression. Oh, Krugman. Republican staff at the Congressional Joint Economic Release Report. Spend less, owe less, grow the economy. Argued that slashing government spending and employment in the face of a deeply depressed economy would actually create jobs. I feel like he literally said, like, PERS are running out of system. Debt to GDP is kind of weird because GDP was falling massively. Well, yeah, but I don't know. I feel like I would still care about it more than the nominal value of the debt. But, like, you should. You should be increasing the debt to GDP ratio during a depression. That's something you should probably be doing.
The economy was poised for a beautiful recovery, but that recovery was stalled by these misguided policies. By artificially inflating both prices and wages, the New Deal policies short-circuited the market's self-correcting forces. Then there's the second theory of the Great Depression, the monetarist theory. In their classic 1960...
Fucking hell, I'm not... Oh, Milton Friedman. I'm not gonna... I don't have enough background knowledge about the Great Depression to specifically know whether the monetarist version is right. We'll have to read more on it later. Damn.
63 book, A Monetary History of the United States. Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz suggested the Great Depression was caused by a drop in the stock of money. Banks began calling in loans in order to pay off their depositors, thus sucking liquidity out of the economy. This lack of monetary supply, they argued, led to a massive contraction as people hoarded the money they had. In the aftermath of the collapse of Keynesian theory of economics, thanks to stagflation in the 70s, in which money was injected into the system only to lead to high levels of inflation and economic stagnation, the monetarist theory became the way of the world. It remains the basis for Federal Reserve policy today, which seeks monetary stability. The final theory of the Great Depression is the Austrian theory.
Okay, well, that was a really short explanation, but I mean, like... What's funny is that Ben Shapiro fucking, like, all I've seen Ben Shapiro do, like, for the past, for the past, like, I guess I wasn't really watching Ben Shapiro 2 years ago. All I've ever seen Ben Shapiro do is, like, rant about how bad increasing the money supply is to, because it's increasing inflation. He's like, Democrats are injecting $500 billion trillion into the money supply and it's increasing inflation. But now he's saying
injected into
it's good to do that.
This lack of monetary supply, they argued, led to a massive...
So I guess he's not saying it's good. He's just explaining the monetarist theory. But I mean,
contraction as people hoarded the money they had. In the aftermath of the collapse of Keynesian theory of economics, thanks to
like, if that's true, then what we should have done is probably increase the supply of money.
Inflation
then, right?
in the 70s, in which money was injected into the system only to lead to high levels of...
Also, earlier he was suggesting that Jerome Powell only is suggesting rate cuts now to help get Kamala elected, which is interesting.
Inflation and economic stagnation. Monetarist theory became the way of the world. It remains the basis for Federal Reserve policy today, which seeks monetary stability. The final theory of the Great Depression is the Austrian theory. These economists believe that easy money policies essentially created a bubble prior to the Great Depression. That bursting bubble was then exacerbated by terrible economic policy. There's a debate among Austrian economists as to whether Milton Friedman's theory of monetary contraction was correct, or whether, as Murray Rothbard argued, the real problem was a lack of faith in the system from the population at large, that the Federal Reserve could not have stemmed by simply injecting more cash into the system. We'll get to more on this in a second. First, anybody with a basic understanding of economics can see the economy is not in amazing shape right now. I'm not saying that the plane is falling out of the sky, but just in case it were, you would want
a
parachute. Well, here is your economic parachute warning. I've been telling you for years. You need to diversify your portfolio with precious metals. If you listened to me years ago, little bend to 98.98 or the economy is made before August 38.98 today.
The home next to it is in foreclosure. 2 others behind me, and one across the street, and 2 more at the end.
It's like, leaving your children. I mean, I'm walking away from something that's meant so much to me.
The arguments about the Great Depression were projected forward into arguments about the causes of the Great Recession in 2007-2008. The left essentially argued that greedy banking industry titans took advantage of predatory loans on those who couldn't afford them, sliced and diced those loans and mixed them with higher rated assets, creating an entire industry of poison credit instruments, which were then insured in credit default swaps. When subprime loans went bust, the entire system took it on the chin. The solution was...
That's actually, guys, we might end up agreeing with Ben here. Okay, I haven't done a ton of reading into it, but like part of the like reading I've done a little bit on like nominal GDP targeting. Part of that reading is basically monetary policy could have been too loose prior to the financial crisis. I'm not gonna remember exactly what he said, but I know Scott Summer has a lot of, or Scott Sumer, something like that. I think he did a lecture for the Adam Smith Institute, which we've listened to part of, where he talks about it.
Says that
thing is, FDR caused a recession by lowering government spending in 1937. The New Deal helped a lot prior to that, but we really got out of the Great Depression by spending during World War II. Yeah, obviously. It's important to remember that FDR's treasury was a massive deficit hawk. Yep. I feel like...
So let's start off with a quote which represents, I think, the consensus view and the way it's linked up to the Great Depression, which is an area I've done a lot of research. This is from Robert Hall, very respected American economist. And the very first paragraph of a paper he wrote on this crisis starts off with some sentences that I think are actually completely wrong, but most people would kind of probably read over without even thinking about. So let's look at what he says. The worst financial crisis in the history of the US and many other countries started in 1929. Actually, that's not true. There was no financial crisis in the United States in 1929. The financial crisis was in 31, 32, 33. Now, why am I being so picky about that? Because the implication of this introduction is that the financial crisis of 1929 caused the Great Depression. But if, in fact, the Great Depression began in 29, and it did, and the financial crisis was in 31, 32, and 33, it makes more sense to think about the Great Depression as leading to bank failures, international foreign exchange crises, and so on. Then he continues, the second worst struck in the fall of 2008. Now, that is true. That's referring to Lehman Brothers.
Nice one, bro. Thank you for the 5-bit slice, Kanye West.
Which failed in September 2008, and the next few months were quite a bad banking crisis. And the Great Recession followed. Well, the Great Recession began in December 2007. Now, I will cut him a little bit of slack because the Great Recession was mild for the first 6 months. But if you look at the data, the U.S. economy pretty much fell off the cliff, and for that matter, the global economy, right around June. I'm not tall enough to quite reach that peak, but that peak there is in June of 2008, and the trough, which I can barely reach, is December of 2008. And I'm going to refer over the next few minutes quite a bit to that 6-month period, because these, by the way, are monthly estimates of a private firm of GDP that's actually only officially computed quarterly. But you really need to look at the monthly estimates to get a sense of how dramatic the decline was, how rapid, and what a short period much of the damage was done in. June to December 2008. Okay. Now that's nominal GDP. By itself, that tells us nothing about the business cycle. I mean, the fastest growing nominal GDP over the last 15 years in the world was probably Zimbabwe. And they had a depression around 2005 to 10, somewhere there. So nominal GDP tells you nothing about the business cycle by itself. In the long run, real and nominal variables are unrelated. But it so happens that for many industrial countries, the US, Britain, Eurozone, in the short run, nominal and real are highly correlated. If I toggle back and forth between these graphs, you can clearly see same sort of pattern. The nominal grows a little bit more because there's inflation included in nominal variables. Basically, nominal GDP growth is inflation plus real GDP growth. But in the short run, a dramatic change in nominal GDP will almost always show up in real GDP. And you can see real GDP also decline sharply. If we go back, if I had asked a bunch of economists, very prestigious mainstream economists, back in 2006, I'd shown them this graph and asked, what do you think would happen to the economy if nominal GDP did this because monetary policy was too contractionary? And also, I want you to assume there's no financial distress at all. No banking crisis, no financial crisis. If this happened to nominal GDP, a 4% decline over a year instead of a normal 5% increase, which is the trend in the US, meaning that a 9% gap opened up between actual and trend GDP. What would that do to real GDP? Most macroeconomists would say something like this, even if you told them to assume no banking crisis. So that's a sufficient condition. Now, this is what got me into blogging and why I'm here, I guess, indirectly. For years.
Yeah, I think Ben Shapiro is probably going to argue that monetary policy was too loose, and that's what led to like a speculative bubble. We'll read about it a lot more one day. I think there's actually probably a better argument to be made that monetary policy was too tight leading up to the financial crisis.
I've been teaching monetary economics. Out of the most popular textbook in the United States, written by Frederick Mishkin, who served at the Federal Reserve Board. And this is sort of some of the summary points he makes towards the end of the textbook that he really wants the students to be aware.
Some will agree that nominal GDP changes real GDP in the short run. I mean, he said they're highly correlated in the short run. I don't know if he agrees that they change it.
Let's look first at the first and third. It's dangerous to associate easing and tightening monetary policy with short-term interest rates. And yet I felt in late 2008, almost everybody I talked to was assuming Fed policy was very easy. When I asked why, they would say, well, because interest rates are very low. Third point, monetary policy can be highly effective in reviving a weak economy, even if short-term interest rates are near zero. Again, I would talk to people and they'd say, well, the Fed is out of ammunition. They've cut interest rates close to zero. There's nothing more the Fed can do. So I started to wonder, how is it that we've been teaching these ideas to our students for decades, and we didn't seem to believe them when a crisis hit? Are the textbooks wrong, or are what we are thinking now?
Yeah, I don't know if that highly correlated was meant to imply that. I don't know, but
How is that wrong? And I think the textbooks had it right. Now in the middle, Michigan points to the role of other asset prices.
I mean, obviously, he's a monetarist. Like he said in the long run that they're not related to each other. So
and what they can tell us about the stance of monetary policy. We're going to look at some other asset prices, and what we're going to see in a moment is that they were all signaling money is very tight. Everything except short-term nominal interest rates was signaling extremely tight money. Before I do,
yeah, I feel like I think I watched about half of this, and then I think I read one article from the Cato Institute about nominal GDP targeting. However, I am inclined to believe this guy more than Ben Shapiro, just because I know Ben Shapiro is probably not acting as good a faith. And they're both like I guess Ben claims to be a libertarian. Okay, they're both like libertarians. So I am equally skeptical of both of them. It's just that Ben Shapiro has proven himself to be more stupid.
More government regulation, and for some reason, more subsidization of demand for things like subprime mortgages. The right argues that all of this was incentivized by governmental action via Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that the Clinton-era revision of the Community Investment Act led to bank regulators pressuring banks to make those subprime loans with the quiet guarantee.
Well, he said in the long run they're always going to look the same, right? I think he said in the long run that they're completely unrelated.
Variables. Basically, nominal GDP growth is inflation. More real countries, the U.S., Britain, Eurozone. In the short run, nominal and real are highly correlated. If I toggle back and forth between these graphs, you can clearly see same sort of pattern. The nominal grows a little bit more because there's inflation included in nominal variables. Basically, nominal GDP growth is inflation plus real GDP growth. But in the short run, a dramatic change in nominal GDP will almost always show up in real GDP.
Will almost always show up.
You can see real GDP also decline sharply. If we go back, if I had asked a bunch of economists,
guarantee that if things went south, the government would bail them out. By the year 2000, Fannie and Freddie had been ordered by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to make half of their mortgage purchases affordable housing loans. Total CRA lending spiked from $8 billion in 1991 to...
Hell yeah, 300 views. Why is the land value tax one doing the work? Oh no, it's just I guess I uploaded it more recently.
$4.5 trillion in 2007. By 1999, only 45% of residential mortgage loans acquired by Fannie and Freddie were solid prime loans. As Senator Phil Gramm, former Republican chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and Mike Solon, former economic policy advisor to Mitch McConnell, wrote, quote, "The people who destroyed lending standards by driving subprime lending blame banks, greed, deregulation for causing the financial crisis. But a review of banking laws adopted since 1980 reveals that not one single safety and soundness measure was repealed."
We've risen from recession.
What is the name? What is the name of it? Wasn't there literally I think it was like in the 90s, some restriction was repealed and then Obama had to pass it again. What was it? 2008. Glass-Steagall, yes, Glass-Steagall. Vert Gang, what's up? The Glass-Steagall Act. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that point was. I don't know enough about the government policy for subprime shit. But I know there were also issues with weren't like insurance agencies or whatever, like rating agencies, weren't they giving like these Glass-Steagall not safety and soundness? I don't know, who knows.
Blame banks, greed.
I think he said
in 1999, only 45% of residential mortgage loans acquired by Fannie and Freddie were solid prime loans. As Senator Phil Gramm, former Republican chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and Mike Solon, former economic policy advisor to Mitch McConnell, wrote, quote, "The people who destroyed lending standards by driving subprime lending blame banks, greed, deregulation for causing the financial crisis."
Plastic was one of them that prevented commercial investment.
A review of
banking
banking laws
combined,
adopted since 1980 reveals that not one single safety and soundness measure was repealed. Crisis. But a review of banking laws adopted.
I don't know. I don't know if he's still quoting
Since 1980 reveals that not one single safety and soundness measure was repealed.
We've risen.
But standards by driving subprime lending blame banks. Policy advisor to Mitch McConnell wrote, quote, "The people who destroyed lending."
Looks like Ben is trying to copy Johnny Harris style. Everyone is. I mean, well, it's just a popular style now. It's the YouTube game. By driving subprime lending. But a review of banking law adopted since 1980 reveals that not a single safety and soundness measure was repealed. It's just it's just Phil Graham saying this. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But what wasn't also the issue? A lot of like the AAA rating subprime weren't the like rating agencies literally like lying? So conservative guy just said it. It seems like it. Did he just make that up? I think so. I don't really know. He doesn't link a source for it. So why did rating agencies do such a bad job? The conventional answer draws heavily on the fact that ratings are paid for by the issuer. It's a conflict of interest. Issuers could and do buy high ratings from willing sellers to the rating agencies. The conventional answer cannot be wholly correct or even nearly so. Issuers also pay rating agencies to rate their corporate bond issues, yet few corporate bonds are rated AAA. If rating agencies were selling for high ratings, why weren't high ratings sold for corporate bonds? Moreover, okay, blah, blah, blah. I haven't fucking timed it. What is the alternative? There was indeed jockeying among the rating agencies for market share. Certainly the quote in the preceding section to indicate that there was some concern over competitive position, but the strong form view predicated as is on the notion that rating agencies were really being paid for high ratings is that they knew or deliberately avoided knowing that the securities didn't warrant such ratings, but gave them to preserve or increase their market share. Hypothesizes something very unlikely. That is, it hypothesizes the agencies were acting to their benefit in the very short term in a manner that would have been disastrous in a moderate term. Short term agencies would have preserved or increased market share. Moderate term was downgraded and perhaps default to highly rated instruments. There would be considerable loss of market share, perhaps leading to the agency's failure. Thus, it seems more likely that such shocking with market share was occurring. What's being done against a backdrop of something broader, a general belief that it entered a brave new world in which risk to overstate the case a bit had been conquered. Indeed, for the past few decades, many of Wall Street managed to persuade themselves that quaints or rocket scientists could develop new instruments that would offer rewards far greater than the commensurate risk. Many market participants, including ABN and AMRO, and Bear Stearns, as described above, drank the Kool-Aid that reflected a belief in a brave new world of manageable managed risk. Many of them were indeed persuaded by the very high-tech instruments at issue in structured finance.
Lending standards by driving subprime lending, blame banks.
But this doesn't, importantly, this is not, they did not think risk had been conquered because of government intervention here. Doesn't seem like that, at least. Here, let's just Control F, enter. Oh, they don't even mention intervention once. Okay, fire.
Greed, deregulation for causing the financial crisis. But a review of banking laws adopted since 1980 reveals that not one single safety and soundness measure was repealed.
We've risen from recession. We have the capacity to write our own future. We're better positioned than any other nation on earth.
All these theories were tried out in the aftermath of the crash of 2008. The economic crash became a Great Recession thanks to the intervention of Barack Obama, who spiked spending, taxation, and regulation. He followed FDR's playbook. The result was the slowest economic recovery in modern American history. In
It was slow because we didn't spend enough. That's the thing, though. That's the thing. That's the funny thing is that yes, it was the slowest recovery in history because it also had one of the smaller bailouts in history. First of all, fucking compare the U.S. to any European country which stagnated for way longer. Like, God, pull up the graphs I like. You see how they did? UK didn't recover from 2008. Dude, have I lost my mind? The libertarians say loan, finance, securities, speculation, nothing to do with the Great Depression. Yeah, they've always said that because they're anti-interventionists. They don't. Yeah. Yeah, it's dumb, but yeah, the US US 2008 recovery versus Europe. Most of the European countries did what Ben wants them to do, which is austerity measures, and their recovery sucked even more ass than ours. Yeah. I can barely. It seems like we're lower than some country in this graph, but yeah, look at all these countries that have a lower GDP per capita than 2008. Holy shit. Seven-day rolling average. Oh, that's coronavirus. I don't know why that is there. But yeah, a lot of European countries like totally stagnated after 2008 and had like much higher unemployment. Give me one sec. Hold on. Let me get my Krugman. I think there's a graph in this book. Aha. The unemployment rate. It's backwards. Transform. Where's transform? Transform. Flip horizontal. Okay, the unemployment rate. The early phase from late 2007 to early 2010, both Europe and America plunged into deep recession and experienced rapid and rising unemployment. The rise was sharper in the United States, where it's much easier to fire people than it was in most of Europe. But in any case, the whole North American economy suffered the worst blow since the onset of the Great Depression. Starting in 2010, however, the two sides of the Atlantic started to diverge. On one side, America started adding jobs, although its initial fall in unemployment was a partially statistical illusion, as explained above, or as explained below. Don't care right now. Okay, by 2011 and 2010, 2012, a clear trend of economic improvement had emerged. The European economy, by contrast, went from bad to worse. By 2012, the continent went officially back into recession. Yeah, you can see the euro area is on top. Their unemployment started increasing, and ours kept going down. The euro austerity cucked countries, which followed Ben Shapiro's advice, okay, which followed the liquidate. I think this quote is in here too. Yeah, we should just read this whole book on stream. Maybe the quote isn't in here. I don't know. What book is it? This one is End This Depression Now by Krugman. Yeah, I don't know. I think the liquidate labor quote might be in the other book. It might be in it might be in The Return of Depression Economics. I've never read it. I've heard good things about it. I think I heard good things about the prequel to it, but it seems interesting. I don't know. I read like the first 10 pages or something. That's how I knew that graph was in there. But regardless, stimulus-based austerity cucked Ben Shapiro owned. Ben Shapiro also cucked.
About $1.5 trillion. In 2007, the federal government spent about $2.7 trillion. In 2009, that number jumped to $3.5 trillion and stayed around or above that number for the entirety of Barack Obama's.
Is this the entirety of the budget, or is this the? Yeah, this is the entirety of the budget, right? This isn't the deficit, and this isn't just the stimulus.
Presidency. To understand what bad depression policy looks like, it's also worth looking at two depressions that didn't happen. In 1907, the stock market cratered after a failed attempted takeover of United Copper, a consortium of major bankers led by
he could be right about this stuff. I have no clue. I've never heard of it.
JP Morgan came in and bought up all the troubled assets.
Obama didn't spend enough. Exactly.
John Rockefeller inserted an enormous amount of his own money into a troubled bank. The panic lasted precisely 1 month. In 1920, the markets entered a depression as the United States and the rest of the world exited the war economy of World War I. Inflation and wartime expenditures had put governments behind the 8 ball. Their solution, a massive slashing of the federal budget, from $18.5 billion in 1919 to $6.4 billion in 1920, and then all the way down to $3.3 billion in 1922. The New York Fed, meanwhile, raised its discount rate despite a collapse in the monetary base. The unemployment rate spiked to 11.7% in 1921. It was down to 2.4% by 1923. As Robert P. Murphy of the Independent Energy Institute writes, the conclusion seems obvious to anyone whose mind is not firmly locked into the Keynesian or monetarist framework. The free
My mind is locked into the Keynesian
market work. Economic theory has practical consequences. A free market remains the single best answer to the possibility of a Great Depression. Not regulation, not priming the pump. The free market.
Base Biden saved our economy. He did, bro. That's why we have frying pan charts. It was so mega based. When is my Biden yard sign getting here? Let me check my email real quick. I ordered that shit like more than 2 weeks ago now. Biden's MMT pill, that's why he's incoherent. Check order status. Awaiting fulfillment still. Goddamn. Oh. Another 15 trillion. Another 20, or what's it? The meme is 20 trillion. Another 20 trillion in stimulus. Base Biden moment. Another 20, yeah. To Israel. Another 20 trillion to old people. It's actually so easy. Actually so easy. More people reposting. Give out GDP to Israel. Fight the war there. 3K views. Hell yeah. 1 new follower. Elon might see it. I doubt it. The whole U.S. economy is dedicated to securing Eretz Israel. Blowing up on TikTok too, guys. Most taxes. People like the Phillips curve one more on TikTok. I can't believe TikTok is a based Phillips curve hating platform. Okay, I don't care. Holy shit. Oh my god, get fucked. What? Okay, including Japan. Japan's been stagnant for like decades before the crisis. So, you know, including Japan is maybe that's a little unfair, but oh my god, get absolutely fucking shit on. Holy hell, man. Oh my god. Holy shit. What a fucking joke. This is just sad. For Europe people, I know. This is just, it's so embarrassing for them. Same thing happened after COVID too. Although they did more, I'm pretty sure they didn't go through as heavy as of austerity during COVID. Hentai anime revenue should be enough to pass all of USA and Europe. Japan number 1. It's not quite there. Yeah, I don't think Ben Shapiro knows. Japan is up next, bro. They just need more QE. I'm pretty sure doesn't Japan literally have negative interest rate? Japan, don't they have a negative interest rate? And they still like have deflation. Another 10 trillion to the banks, yeah. In March 2024, they ended. Well, this was the whole. Yeah, this is why the Kamala crash happened, because they raised their. Japan raised their fucking rates to like 0.25 basis points. Yeah, but they had negative interest rates for a while. It was literally free money. They gotta buy more corporate bonds, drive down the interest rates. It won't work. It's a way. Monetary stimulus is effective. I think there's I think like literally the Bank of Japan is the largest owner of index funds in Japan. I'm pretty sure they literally, yeah, Bank of Japan becomes biggest Japan stock owner. The Bank of Japan has taken over the biggest owner of the nation's stock, with total value holdings climbing well above 400 billion. Japanese government is MMT pilled on monetary policy but not on fiscal policy, and they hate immigrants. They don't we read that like No Opinion blog article. It seems like they're more accepting of immigrants now. They don't necessarily want immigrants to stay. They just want immigrants to come and work and then leave. But it seems like they accepted relatively decent amount of immigrants now, which is good and based and awesome sauce pilled. No opinions of Weeaboo. He gets ratioed on Twitter for that take. Okay. I think I don't know. I haven't seen any good counter to that. So, good counter to the argument itself. Liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate the farmers, liquidate real estate. That, according to Herbert Hoover, was the advice he received from Andrew Mellon, the Treasury Secretary, as America plunged into depression. He gets ratioed on Twitter for that, so you're wrong. To be fair, there's some question about whether Mellon actually said that. All we have is Hoover's version, written many years later. But one thing is clear. Mellon-style liquidationism is now the official doctrine of the GOP. 2 weeks ago, Republican staff at the Congressional Joint Economic Committee released a report, Spend Less, Owe Less, Grow the Economy. That argued that slashing government spending and employment in the face of a deeply depressed economy would actually create jobs. In part, they invoked the aid of the confidence fairy. More on that in a minute, but the leading argument was pure Mellon. Here's the report's explanation of how layoffs would create jobs. A smaller government workforce increases the available supply of educated, skilled workers for private firms, thus lowering labor cost, dropping sticky wages, but dropping the euphemisms. What this says is that by increasing unemployment, particularly of educated, skilled workers, in case you're wondering, that mainly means school teachers. Oh, awesome, man. We can drive down wages, which would encourage hiring. Let's just, yeah. We're in a recession. You know what we need to do right now? Decrease human capital. Get rid of the teachers. Fuck the teachers. Pay them even less. We don't need none of that, bro. There is, if you think about it, an immediate logical problem here. Republicans are saying that job destruction leads to lower wages, which leads to job creation. But won't this job creation lead to higher wages, which leads to job destruction, which leads to I need some aspirin. I would love to be paid less if it means the line could go up a little more. Exactly, bro. Beyond that, why would lower wages promote higher employment? There's a fallacy of composition here. Since workers at any individual company may be able to save their jobs by accepting a pay cut, you think that we could increase overall employment by cutting everyone's wages. But pay cuts, as General Motors have helped save some workers' jobs and making GM more competitive with other companies whose wages costs haven't fallen. Hold on, I read that wrong. But pay cuts at, say, General Motors have helped some workers' jobs by making... Okay, yeah, okay. There's no comparable benefit when you cut everyone's wages at the same time. What's up, Collision? Welcome back. Line going up is more important than healthcare, food security for my child. True. Oh, I didn't even realize you were the one. I thought it was Copeland O'Kay sending that first message. Sorry. Should have welcomed you back sooner. Point is, I noticed eventually. In fact, across-the-board wage cuts would almost certainly reduce, not increase employment. Why? Because while earnings would fall, debts would not. So a general fall in wages would worsen the debt problem that are, at some point, the principal obstacle to recovery. In short, Mellonism is as wrong now as it was four score years ago. Now liquidationism isn't the only argument from the GOP report. The only argument the GOP report advances to support the claim that reducing employment is actually creates jobs. It also invokes a confidence theory. That is, it suggests that cuts in public spending would stimulate private spending by raising consumer and business confidence, leading to an economic expansion. Or maybe suggest, isn't the right word, it insinuates maybe closer to the mark. For a funny little thing happened lately to the doctrine of the expansionary austerity. The notion that cutting government spending, even a slump, leads to faster economic growth. A year ago, conservatives gleefully trumpeted statistical studies that supposedly showing many successful examples of expansionary austerity. Since then, however, those studies have been more or less thoroughly debunked by careful researchers, most notably at the International Monetary Fund. To their credit, the staffers who wrote the GOP report were clearly aware that evidence no longer supports their position. To their discredit, the response was to make the same old arguments while adding weasel words to cover themselves. Instead of asserting outright spending cuts are expansionary, the report says that confidence effects of austerity can boost GDP growth. Can under what circumstances? Boost relative to what? It doesn't say. Did I mention that in Britain, where the government took that power last May, brought completely into the doctrine of expansionary austerity, the economy is stalled and business confidence has fallen to a 2-year low, and even the government's new, more pessimistic projections are based on the assumption that the highly indebted British households will take on even more debt in the years ahead. But never mind the lessons of history or events unfolding across the Atlantic. Republicans are now fully committed to the doctrine that we must destroy employment in order to save it. And Democrats are offering little pushback. The White House, in particular, has effectively surrendered the war of ideas. It no longer even tries to make the case against sharp spending cuts in the face of high unemployment. So that's the state of the policy debate in the world's greatest nation. One party has embraced 80-year-old economic fallacies, while the other has lost the will to fight it, and American families will pay the price. TikTok is